It can be really tough to figure out who's a true visionary and who's just, really good at spinning a yarn,
Yeah, especially these days.
especially these days.
Uh,
But that's what we're here to do.
Absolutely.
And in this deep dive, we're going to be looking at Gerald D. Hines.
Big name in real estate.
Huge,
Died a few years back, 2020, I think.
95 years old.
Wow.
Long life.
He had quite the story, too. I mean, talk about rags to riches.
Went from basically nothing to a global empire.
Started with just him in Houston and ended up with projects in something like 225 cities.
Across 25 countries.
Crazy, right?
Field.
But that's exactly what we're going to try to figure out. Did he actually elevate architecture and make it better? Or was he just really good at making money?
The classic grifter or gifted
Yeah.
question. And honestly, Hines is like the perfect example.
He really is.
Because you can't deny how much he did.
Right.
He changed skylines. He changed how we think about buildings. But then there's that other side, like, what was he really after?
Was it all about the art or all about the bottom line?
Exactly. All right, well, to get started, let's go all the way back to the beginning.
Humble beginnings.
Very humble.
Gary, Indiana.
During the Depression, no less.
Tough times.
Really tough. And his dad worked in a steel mill.
An electrician.
That's right.
So Hines knew about hard work from day one.
Oh, yeah, work ethic was ingrained in him. But even as a kid, he was fascinated by buildings,
I read somewhere that he was obsessed with the Chicago skyline.
especially the Wrigley Building.
Interesting. I wonder if there's some kind of, psychological connection there.
Maybe. But here's the thing. He didn't go straight into architecture.
Yeah, he actually studied mechanical engineering.
At Purdue,
And then he started out designing HVAC systems.
air conditioning and all that.
Kind of surprising, right?
It is when you think about what he became known for,
But he ended up in Houston in 48.
right? When the city was booming.
And everybody wanted air conditioning.
Makes sense. So he was in the right place at the right time with the right skills.
Yeah. But the real story starts when he gets that entrepreneurial bug.
He couldn't resist that side hustle.
Still working as an engineer, but starts developing these small office buildings on the side.
Risky.
Very risky.
But you got to remember, Houston back then was changing so fast.
A lot of opportunity if you were willing to take a chance.
And Hines was definitely willing.
But the thing that really launched him, the thing that really put him on the map was Shell Oil Company.
Shell.
Yeah.
That was a game changer.
1966, I think.
He gets Shell to be the main tenant for his first skyscraper. One Shell Plaza.
Massive deal.
And I love the story of how he sealed the deal.
Oh, with the bronze door handles.
Yeah. Tell me about that again.
So picture this. He's in the meeting with all these Shell executives,
Big wig.
and he just walks in with these bronze door handles,
Mhm.
slams them down on the table,
Love.
and says, basically, this is the level of quality you can expect in every detail of this building.
Bold move.
Bold doesn't even cover it. But it worked.
It did. Shell signed the deal, and One Shell Plaza became a Houston icon.
Talk about making an entrance.
It was really the start of something huge for Hines, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. This deal propelled him to a whole new level.
And it really solidified his whole philosophy.
Which was?
That great architecture doesn't have to be boring. That it can be beautiful and make money at the same time.
And that's what set him apart. He challenged how the whole industry thought about office buildings.
And he wasn't afraid to work with some of the biggest names in architecture to get what he wanted.
IMP, Philip Johnson, Frank Gehry.
The best of the best.
And that's how you get buildings like Pennzoil Place.
The one in Houston.
Yeah, with that crazy trapezoid shape.
Ada Louise Huxtable called it the building of the decade.
New York Times architecture critic.
Exactly. So that's got to mean something.
Definitely.
And then there's the Lipstick Building in Manhattan.
Oh, yeah, the one that looks like, well, a lipstick.
It's hard to miss that one on the Skyline.
And then there's the Galleria in Houston.
The one with the ice rink?
Yeah, that was like revolutionary at the time. A mixed-use development with shops, offices, and an ice rink in the middle.
So Hines was thinking way ahead.
Totally. He understood that buildings weren't just about bricks and mortar, they were about creating experiences. And it makes you think back to his engineering background.
You think so?
Yeah. Maybe all that time with HVAC systems.
Right. Thinking about how buildings work on the inside.
It must have influenced how he approached development.
It's not just what it looks like, it's how it works.
Exactly. And I think that's a big part of why he was so successful.
Because he understood how to make a building that actually functioned well.
Right. Not just looked pretty.
And especially for those corporate tenants.
They want to know their investment is going to work for them.
It has to be functional, well-maintained, And,
And energy efficient.
you can't just throw money at a fancy address.
Exactly. And that's where Hines' reputation for quality really comes in.
He was really known for that, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. Top-notch materials, the latest technology, skilled workers.
He didn't cut corners.
He believed that investing in quality upfront would pay off in the long run.
And his buildings are known for lasting.
Absolutely. And that commitment to quality, well,
It attracted those big-name tenants.
the ones who are willing to pay top dollar.
And that obviously fueled his success.
It's like a cycle, right?
Quality brings in the tenants.
Tenants bring in the money.
Money lets you invest even more in quality.
Exactly. But it wasn't just about the physical building either.
Well,
He also understood what we now call tenant experience.
what's that?
He knew a building is more than just a place to work.
Okay.
It affects people's mood, how productive they are, even their well-being.
So he was thinking about things like amenities,
Natural light, art.
decades before anyone was talking about work-life balance.
Right. It's kind of amazing how ahead of his time he was.
He was. And then there's his commitment to sustainability.
That was big.
Starting back in the late 70s, he was already incorporating those energy-saving programs into his buildings.
He was thinking about the environment long before it was trendy.
And in 2006, he went all in.
All new Hines projects had to be LE certified.
LE certified.
It's like a gold standard for environmentally friendly buildings.
Oh, yeah.
It means they meet really strict standards for energy efficiency, water conservation, air quality, all that.
So Hines was a pioneer when it comes to green building.
He definitely was.
And it makes you wonder, was he really just driven by profit?
It's a good question.
Or did he actually care about making a difference?
Some people think sustainability and profit are opposites.
Yeah, like you can't have both.
But Hines proved them wrong.
He showed that being environmentally responsible could also be good for business.
Exactly. And his commitment went beyond his own company, too.
You mean his philanthropy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He gave a ton of money to support architectural education, like that $7 million donation to the University of Houston.
Which is now named the Gerald Hines College of Architecture and Design.
Yeah, it shows you how much he believed in nurturing the next generation of architects.
And he didn't just write checks. He mentored young architects in his own firm.
He really wanted to pass on his knowledge and experience.
So he wasn't just building buildings, he was building a legacy.
Absolutely.
But we still have that big question.
The million-dollar question.
Was Gerald Hines a true visionary?
Or just a really good businessman who happened to appreciate good design.
He's a complex figure,
That's for sure.
and it's not easy to categorize him
You can't just put him in a box and say he was this or he was that.
because he was incredibly successful. But what was it all about for him?
Was it just about making money? Or was there something more to it?
Like a genuine desire to create something that would last.
Something meaningful.
And that's really what we're grappling with in this deep dive.
It's tempting to try to simplify things, to put people into neat categories.
But real life is rarely that simple.
Especially with someone like Hines, whose career spanned decades and whose buildings literally transformed cities.
I mean, when you look at the sheer scale of what he accomplished, it's mind-boggling.
It really is. And it makes you wonder what drove him.
What was it? Ambition? The need for recognition? Or was it something else entirely?
And it's not just about Hines himself, right?
What do you mean?
His story makes you think about the role of developers in general.
Okay.
How much do they shape our cities?
Are they just responding to what people want?
Or are they creating those desires in the first
This
place?
is kind of like the chicken and the egg.
Exactly.
Which came first? Did people want these massive skyscrapers and sprawling malls, or did Hines convince them that's what they wanted?
And I think it's fair to say that Hines was a master salesman.
He could convince anyone of anything.
Investors, city officials, even communities that were skeptical of his plans.
He could make them believe in his vision.
And his vision often involved pushing the limits.
He wasn't afraid to take risks.
To try new materials, new designs, new ideas.
And sometimes that led to controversy.
Like with the Galleria.
Right.
It was a groundbreaking project, but it also contributed to Houston's urban sprawl and dependence on cars.
So some people praise him for his vision.
While others criticize him for making urban problems worse.
It's a mixed bag.
And it shows that we have to think about the long-term effects of these development decisions.
What might seem like progress in the short term can have unintended consequences down the line.
And it's not just about the environment either.
Right. There are social and economic implications too.
Gentrification, displacement of communities, the concentration of wealth.
These are complex issues that are still being debated today.
And Hines's legacy is part of that conversation.
Every building tells a story.
And Hines's buildings tell the story of the aspirations and struggles of the communities they're in.
The power dynamics at play.
Exactly. And those are stories worth exploring.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Gerald Hines,
We're left with more questions than answers.
was he a visionary or a shrewd operator?
An innovator. Or a disruptor.
Ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide what we think about his impact on the world.
That's the beauty of these deep dives. We don't give you the answers.
We just encourage you to think critically.
To engage with these complicated questions.
So as you think about Gerald Hines, ask yourself, does the pursuit of profit always come at the expense of artistic vision?
Or can the two coexist in a way that benefits both the individual and the community?
What do you think? Let us know.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
And I think it all comes down to this question.
Our big question.
Grifter or gifted?
Was Hines a visionary or just a really good businessman?
Who happened to have good taste?
Exactly.
Because you can't deny he was successful.
Oh, incredibly successful.
But was it all about the money?
Or did he genuinely want to make a difference?
Create something lasting.
Something meaningful.
That's what we've been trying to figure out.
Well, that's the heart of this whole deep dive, isn't it?
It is, and it's tempting to oversimplify things.
To try and put people into neat little boxes.
But with someone like Hines, whose career was so long and whose buildings literally changed the face of cities,
It's not that easy.
it's not.
You have to look at the bigger picture.
You do, and it makes you wonder, what was it that really drove him?
What was the source of all that ambition?
Was it just about being successful?
Or was there something more?
A deeper purpose, maybe?
And I think his story raises some interesting questions about the role of developers.
In general, you mean?
Yeah, how much power do they really have?
To shape our cities?
Are they just giving people what they want?
Or are they the ones creating those wants in the first place?
It's a tricky question.
It really is.
And with Hines, it's especially interesting because he was so good at getting people on board with his vision.
Convincing them that what he wanted was what they needed.
Investors, city officials.
Even people who were skeptical at first.
He had a way of making them believe.
And his vision was often pretty bold, wasn't it?
Absolutely, he was a risk taker.
He wasn't afraid to push the boundaries.
Try new things, new materials, new designs.
And that sometimes got him into trouble.
Like with the Galleria.
Yeah, that's a good example.
It was groundbreaking in a lot of ways.
A really innovative project.
But it also contributed to some of Houston's problems.
Traffic, sprawl.
That dependence on cars.
So you have some people who see him as a visionary.
And others who see him as someone who made things worse.
It's complicated.
It really is, and I think it highlights how important it is to consider the long-term impact of these kinds of projects.
You can't just focus on the short-term gains.
Because what seems like progress at first,
They'd have unintended consequences down the road.
and it's not just about the physical environment either.
There's the social impact, too.
The economic impact.
Gentrification, displacement.
These are all things we have to think about.
And Hines's legacy is intertwined with all of these issues.
Every building he built tells a story.
About the city it's in.
About the people who live and work there.
About the forces that shape our urban landscapes.
It's a fascinating story, and it's one that's still unfolding.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Gerald Hines,
We're left with a lot to think about.
was he a visionary or a shrewd businessman?
A force for good or a symbol of excess?
Ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide how we view his legacy.
And that's what we hope you'll do.
Take what you've learned from this deep dive.
And come to your own conclusions.
Think critically
Ask questions.
and keep exploring the complex world around us.
Thanks for joining us.
And be sure to tune in next time for another deep dive into the life and legacy of a controversial figure.
Until then, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep the conversation going.